The Lost Cadet in Alien Space. Jake Carter opened his eyes slowly. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. He blinked a few times, trying to understand where he was. The ceiling above him was made of smooth metal, glowing softly with blue light. The room smelled strange, like clean air mixed with something alien. He tried to move but felt dizzy. His head hurt. His heart was beating fast. "This isn't my ship," Jake whispered to himself. He was a cadet on the human training ship Nova Star. He remembered they were flying near an asteroid field when something hit them hard. Then, nothing. Now he was here. Jake slowly stood up from the cold metal floor. The room was large and round, with walls covered in symbols he couldn't read. In the center was a smooth black table with lights blinking on its surface. It didn't look human. As he stepped closer, the table lit up. A soft voice echoed through the room. "Commander activated." Jake froze. "Do you what?" he said, looking around. "Who said that?" The voice came again. Calm, female, robotic, but not like Earth A's. Human life form recognized. Rank: Commander. Welcome aboard. Jake stared at the glowing table. "I'm not a commander," he said. "There's been a mistake." But the voice didn't listen. "Systems online. Crew alerted. Awaiting your orders, Commander." Suddenly, a door on the side of the room opened with a smooth hiss. Bright purple light flooded in. Heavy footsteps echoed as several tall figures entered. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Aliens. They were at least 7 feet tall. Their skin was gray and smooth. They wore armor that looked ancient but powerful. Their eyes glowed faint yellow. Each one carried a long staff-like weapon. Jake backed away slowly. One of the aliens stepped forward. He placed his staff on the ground and knelt down on one knee. "Flameborn," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "You have returned." Jake's eyes widened. "What? What did you call me?" The other aliens also knelt, heads bowed low. "The prophecy is true," said another alien. "A human has come to guide us." Jake shook his head. No, I think you've got the wrong person. I'm just a cadet, a student." But they didn't move. They stayed bowed, silent, as if waiting for him to speak. The door behind them opened again. This time, an older alien walked in. His armor was gold and covered in strange symbols. His eyes were brighter than the others. He looked at Jake with respect and fear. "I am High Warden Zurich," the alien said. "We have waited for centuries. You are the one who will command the Varkalon." Jake blinked. "The what?" Zurich gestured toward the wall. A screen lit up, showing the outside of the ship. Jake gasped. It was huge, more massive than any human ship. Long, sharp, and shaped like a blade. Lights ran along its body, and giant cannons moved slowly on its sides. The alien ship was a battleship, and Jake was standing in its command room. This is a mistake," Jake said again. "I don't even know how to fly something like this." Zurich stepped forward and bowed deeply. "You do not need to fly it. You only need to lead us. The ship will obey you. It is written in the flames." Jake was about to speak when a loud alarm rang through the room. "Warning," the robotic voice said. "Enemy fleet approaching. Preparing for combat. Awaiting commander's decision." Jake turned to the screen again. Red dots appeared, many of them. Ships flying fast toward them. Zurich looked calm. "What are your orders, Flameborn?" Jake's mind raced. He didn't know these aliens. He didn't want to be their commander. But they were looking at him like he was their only hope. He had no choice. I need time to think," he said. But the voice replied, cold and clear. "Time denied. Battle begins in 60 seconds." The aliens stood, ready for war. And Jake Carter, lost cadet of Earth, now stood in command of an alien battleship, worshipped by its crew. about to enter a war he didn't understand. The alien code of worship. Jake Carter stood frozen in the center of the alien command room. Lights blinked all around him. The countdown to battle continued. Strange alien symbols flashed across the screens. Red dots, enemy ships, were closing in fast. He looked around at the crew, dozens of aliens, all waiting for one thing. His voice. His command. He wasn't ready. He had never even passed his final exams at the Space Academy. Why me? He whispered under his breath. Zurich, the High Warden, stepped closer. His voice was calm but firm. Flameborn, your presence is the sign. The prophecy lives. You must speak. I don't even know what this ship can do, Jake said. I'm not a leader. I'm just a cadet. Zurich didn't move. Neither did the other aliens. Their eyes glowed with something deeper than belief. It was worship, pure and powerful. Please, Jake said, almost begging. Tell me what this prophecy is. Zurich slowly raised his hand. The screen in front of Jake changed. Now it showed something ancient. A recording. The image was old and cracked with static, but Jake recognized the people. Humans. An old human ship, hundreds of years old, was surrounded by Varnak ships, older versions of the alien species standing around him now. A human commander stood in the middle of the Varnak leaders. Jake leaned in. This is from Earth, he asked. Zurich nodded. From your ancestors. The recording played. The human spoke in calm tones. His voice echoed through the command room. We do not seek to rule you. We only wish to help. Use our knowledge. Protect your future. One day, a human will return. Do not fear them. Trust them. The Varnak in the video bowed before the human. They gave him something, a crystal, glowing bright blue. Then the screen went dark. That man, Zurich said, was the first flame. He saved our people from destruction. He ended a civil war that lasted 100 years. Jake's heart was pounding. You think I'm him? No, Zurich said. But we believe you are the one foretold to return. A second flame. A guide. A savior. Jake shook his head. But that message, he didn't say anything about worship. Zurich's voice became soft. He brought us peace, technology, medicine, a way to survive. Over time, his words became more than history. They became prophecy. Jake swallowed hard. He didn't ask for any of this, but now it was on his shoulders. A soft chime broke the silence. Enemy fleet within attack range. The ship's AI said. Zurich looked at Jake. One word from you, and we will fight. Jake looked at the screen. Red ships, sharp and deadly, were getting closer. He took a deep breath. Don't attack, he said. Hold position. Maybe they don't want to fight. The room went silent. The AI responded, holding fire, weapons on standby. The aliens didn't question it. They accepted it as law. Jake's word was final. But Zurich looked worried. If you hesitate, we may all die. Jake ignored him and turned to the screen. Open a channel. Maybe they'll talk. The AI responded. No communication signal detected. Jake watched as the red ships stopped just outside firing range. The screen zoomed in on one of the enemy vessels. It was different from the others. Familiar. The markings were human. Jake's eyes widened. That ship, it's from Earth. Zurich stepped forward. Another human. Jake nodded slowly. We're not alone out here. The AI spoke again. Incoming message from unknown vessel. Jake held his breath. Put it on screen. The screen changed again. A human face appeared. Sharp, focused, and serious. A woman. She had a scar on her cheek and wore a high-rank Earth Federation uniform. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes locked directly onto Jake's. This is Captain Elise Monroe of the Earth Defense Fleet, she said. Identify yourself immediately. You are in violation of Galactic Code 118. Human interference in alien warfare is forbidden. Who are you, and why are you commanding the Varnak warship? Jake's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had no idea what to say. FLASHBACK, Earth Federation briefing. A few months ago, in a large hall back on Earth, a general stood in front of a map of the galaxy. Cadets, including Jake, sat quietly. The general spoke. Humans have a history of interference. In the early days of exploration, we uplifted many species, like the Varnak, but we also caused problems. Wars, chaos. Now, by law, we stay out of alien politics. Always. Jake had forgotten that law. But now it was too late. Back in the alien command room, the crew waited for his response. Jake stepped closer to the screen. "I'm Jake Carter," he said slowly. "Cadet. I got here by accident. I didn't mean to interfere. I woke up on this ship, and these people, they think I'm part of some prophecy." Captain Monroe narrowed her eyes. "That prophecy is dangerous. You need to step down immediately and hand over control of the ship." Zurich stepped forward, his voice full of warning. "She does not command us. Only the Flameborn does." Jake raised his hand. "Stand down, Zurich." Zurich obeyed, but barely. His jaw was tight. Monroe spoke again. "Jake, you're walking a thin line. These aliens worship you. That's a problem. If they attack under your word, Earth will be held responsible. And that could start a war." Jake looked around the command room, then at the alien crew, then back at the screen. He felt torn in half. He was just a student, a lost cadet. But to these aliens, he was something more. A symbol, a god. He took a deep breath. "I don't want war," Jake said. "And I don't want worship. I just want to find a way out of this." Monroe's face softened. "Then we have to work together. Carefully. Every word you say, every move you make, it matters now." The screen cut off. Silence filled the room. Zurich turned to Jake. "What will you do, Flameborn?" Jake looked at his hands, then out the window at the stars. "I need to understand this prophecy, and I need to find a way to end it. The battle I didn't choose." The stars outside the Varnak battleship burned bright and silent. Jake Carter sat alone in what the aliens called the Hall of Echoes, a room made of glass and glowing stone. A soft hum filled the air, almost like music, but deeper. Everything about the ship still felt unreal. The battle hadn't happened. Not yet. But it was coming. He could feel it. Captain Elise Monroe's warning replayed in his mind. "Every move you make matters now. If they attack under your word, Earth will be blamed." He didn't ask for this power. He didn't want it. But the aliens were watching him. Every second, every breath. Zurich entered the hall quietly. "The crew is restless, flame-born. They do not understand why we wait." Jake stood up. "Because fighting isn't the answer. At least, not yet." Zurich looked unsure. "Our warriors were trained for this moment. The old teachings say the second flame will lead us through fire and war into victory." Jake sighed. "You really believe I was sent here to bring war?" Zurich was silent for a long moment. Then he said softly, "We believed the flame would bring strength. We did not expect hesitation." Jake turned away. "Maybe that's because the real strength isn't in weapons. Maybe it's in knowing when not to use them." Zurich didn't answer. He simply bowed and left. Later, Jake stood on the command bridge. The room was large and open, filled with glowing panels and alien symbols. The crew stood at their stations, silent and ready. The enemy fleet was still there, watching, waiting. Then the ship's eye spoke. Movement detected. Enemy fleet shifting formation. Preparing long-range weapons. Jake felt his stomach drop. "Shields up," he said quickly. His voice shook, but he stood tall. "Shields activated," the AI confirmed. Zurich turned to him. Now they test your resolve. Jake stared at the red dots on the screen. Then something unexpected happened. One of the enemy ships fired. Just one. A warning shot. The blast hit far from the Varnak ship, meant to scare, not destroy. Still, the crew tensed. Hands gripped weapons. Energy charged around the command deck. Jake felt it too. The fear, the pressure. Return fire, the AI asked. Jake hesitated. This was it. One wrong command, and he'd start a war. Not yet, he said. Let me talk to them again. But Monroe didn't answer his call. Instead, the screen flickered to life on its own. A new face appeared. Alien, but different from the Varnak. His skin was a cold silver blue, and his eyes glowed orange. Human, the alien said. I am General Vorik of the Kalari Dominion. You command a ship that belongs to our sworn enemy. Surrender it, or we will destroy you. Jake blinked. I'm not your enemy. I don't even know who you are. Vorik smiled. A cold, cruel smile. Then you are a fool. Or worse, a pawn of the Varnak priests. Jake stepped closer. Listen to me. I don't want war. I want peace. Vorik laughed. Then lay down your weapons, and perhaps I'll let your bones float in space. The screen cut out. Jake stared at the darkness. Wonderful, he muttered. Now I've got two alien empires ready to kill each other, and I'm standing in the middle. Later that night, or what passed for night on a ship with no real sky, Jake found himself in the lower decks, wandering. He needed space, time to think. That's when he met her. A young alien, sitting near a large energy core, watching the lights dance. Her armor was lighter, and she had a strange symbol painted on her shoulder, one Jake hadn't seen before. She looked up as he approached. Her eyes were bright and curious. You are the flame, she said. But you look scared. Jake smiled a little. I'm very scared. She laughed. Good. That means you have a heart. He sat beside her. What's your name? Lyra, she said. I was born on the ship, trained to serve the flame. But I never really believed the stories. Jake raised an eyebrow. Why not? She looked down. Because the stories made humans sound like gods. But gods don't cry. They don't hesitate. They don't get lost in their own ships. Jake laughed softly. Then I guess I'm proof the stories were wrong. She looked at him seriously. Or maybe you're proof they were right. But we misunderstood them. That made Jake think. Maybe the prophecy wasn't about war. Maybe it was about change. The next morning, the AI sounded an alert. Kalari ships moving into attack formation. Countdown to impact. 2 minutes. The bridge buzzed with tension. Zurich stood beside Jake, ready. Jake took a deep breath. He opened a channel. Captain Monroe appeared. So did General Vorik. All of you, listen, Jake said. This doesn't have to end in fire. Vorik's voice was cold. You are not a ruler. You are a boy playing God. Monroe's voice was firm. Jake, you need to give up control before this escalates. Jake looked around the bridge. Lyra stood at the side, watching him. Jake turned to the crew. I won't give the order to fight, he said, because I don't believe in this prophecy the way you do. I think you've waited so long for a leader, you forgot how to lead yourselves. Zurich looked shocked. So did many others. But Jake kept going. I'm not your god. I'm not your savior. I'm just a scared kid who got lost in space. But I believe in peace. And if that means I die here, then so be it. Silence. Then Lyra stepped forward. She bowed her head and said, I will follow you, not because of a prophecy, but because you speak truth. One by one, others followed. Even Zurich. Then the AI spoke. Kalari fleet has locked weapons. Incoming fire in 10, 9, 8. Jake raised his hand. Activate shields. Don't fire back. Shields activated. Brace for impact. The blast hit. The ship shook, but the shields held. The crew stayed calm. No one fired. The Kalari ships hesitated, then turned away. Retreating, Jake collapsed into his chair. He didn't win through power. He won through courage, through restraint, through being human. The other human. The alien ship floated in silence. After the Kalari retreated, the crew of the Varkalon moved with a different energy. Some were confused, some were shaken, but most were watching Jake with new eyes, not as a god, but as something far more dangerous, a human who chose peace and lived. Jake stood at the front of the bridge. He looked over the stars and the empty space between two fleets that had almost destroyed each other. His hands still shook. Lyra stood by the wall, silent but proud. Zurich said nothing, but Jake noticed his eyes held something new. Not worship, but curiosity. The silence was broken by the eye. Incoming communication from Captain Elise Monroe of the Earth Defense Fleet. Jake took a breath. Put her on screen. The screen blinked. Captain Monroe appeared, arms crossed. Her eyes were sharp as knives, but there was something else too, something behind them. Recognition. She looked at Jake for a long time. I don't know whether to court-martial you or salute you. Jake half smiled. How about neither? Let's just talk. Monroe didn't smile back. You disobeyed every code we have. You're on a restricted battleship. You took command of an alien fleet. You violated the Prime Pact. I didn't take command, Jake said. They gave it to me. I woke up here, and suddenly everyone was calling me Flameborn. Monroe looked past him at Zurich, standing still like a statue. The Varnak. I remember them. They've always been odd. Jake leaned forward. You've been here before. Monroe paused. For the first time, her voice softened. Not exactly, but I've seen this pattern. I've read the old reports. Humans saved them once, hundreds of years ago. Now they turn that into religion. Jake nodded. I saw the old message. From the first flame. A human commander trying to help. Monroe stared hard. That wasn't just any human. That was Commander Raylan Carter. Jake froze. His heart skipped. Carter, he whispered. Monroe's face didn't change. Your great-great-grandfather. Didn't they teach you your family history at the academy? Jake stumbled back a step. The room felt colder. He remembered stories, just bits and pieces from his grandmother. A brave man. A legend, but he thought they were just tales. You mean, this whole prophecy started because of him? Monroe nodded. He led a peace mission across alien systems. The Federation told him to observe. He chose to intervene instead, and the Varnak wrote poems about him for 100 years. Jake sat down slowly. I thought I was just a cadet. You are, Monroe said, but your name, your blood, it woke something in them. Later, Jake sat with Lyra in a quiet chamber below the command deck. Strange blue crystals lined the walls, humming softly. He told her everything. About Raylan Carter, about the history, about Earth's laws against getting involved in alien politics. Lyra listened, her eyes wide. So you were born from the first flame. Jake laughed sadly. I was born on Earth. I barely passed my exams. I can't even cook pasta without burning it. Lyra smiled. But you chose peace. That's what the first flame did too. Jake looked at her. Do you really believe this prophecy? Lyra hesitated. I believed it as a child. Then I stopped. Now, I don't know what I believe, but I believe in you. Jake looked down at his hands. I don't want to be worshipped. I just want to do what's right. She leaned closer. Then maybe you are exactly what we need. Zurich called for a council meeting. The senior commanders of the Varkalon gathered in a wide hall lined with ancient battle flags. Jake stood in the center. On the walls were murals of humans, some with wings, halos, glowing eyes. It was surreal. "I want to change the way this ship works," Jake said. "No more blind obedience. No more orders treated like sacred words. You're soldiers. Think for yourselves." One commander stood. His armor was painted with red marks of old victories. "You would tear down centuries of tradition?" he asked coldly. Jake nodded. "If tradition is based on a misunderstanding, then yes." Whispers spread across the room. Zurich raised his voice. "The flame speaks of change. I support him." The red-marked commander slammed his fist on the table. "This is heresy." Jake stepped forward. "You don't need a god. You need leaders who care, who think, who choose peace when it's possible." The red commander growled. "You speak weakness." Jake didn't flinch. "No, I speak humanity." That night, an explosion rocked the ship. Jake jumped from bed, alarm screaming. Red lights blinked across the walls. Lyra ran into his room. "There's been an attack on the council chamber." Jake followed her through twisting halls. Smoke filled the air. Fires burned in corners. The ship's AI shouted reports. "Explosion in Section 9. Unknown device. Casualties confirmed. Suspect at large." In the wreckage, Jake found Zurich, wounded but alive. Blood ran down his arm. He looked up at Jake and whispered, "Not all want peace." Then he passed out. Lyra's face was pale. "Someone wants to stop the change." Jake felt the weight grow heavier. This wasn't just about prophecy anymore. This was about revolution. Later, Monroe called again. "You're in danger," she said. Jake nodded. "Yeah, I figured that out." "There are people on that ship who see you as a threat now," Monroe said. "They don't want peace. They want control." Jake looked tired. "What should I do?" Monroe's voice turned cold. "You give me access to the ship. I'll take control, disable the weapon systems, and pull you out." Jake looked at the Varnak ship around him. "And then what?" "You leave them helpless. Let the Kalari finish them off." "They're unstable," Monroe said. "They built a religion around a man who never wanted it, and now they're doing it again." Jake looked her in the eye. "Then maybe this time, we rewrite the story." He called a shipwide broadcast. Aliens from every corner of the battleship gathered at viewing decks, mess halls, and listening posts. Jake spoke from the heart. "I know many of you see me as something holy, a leader from the stars. But I'm just a human, like the one who came before me." He paused. "I'm not here to rule. I'm here to help you rule yourselves, to break a cycle of blind belief and fear. The future doesn't need a god. It needs you, thinking, choosing, building something better." Silence. Then, slowly, Lyra stepped forward and raised her staff. "I choose him." Then another, and another. Across the ship, one by one, voices began to rise. "I choose peace. I choose truth. I choose Jake." The ship's lights glowed brighter. And in that moment, Jake Carter, cadet, descendant, accidental legend, became something more than prophecy. He became hope. The truth about the prophecy. The stars outside the Varkalon felt quieter now. But inside the ship, a storm was brewing. After the explosion in the council chamber, trust was shaken. Some crew members stood with Jake, believing in peace and change. Others whispered in dark corners, calling him a fraud, a false flame. Even Zurich, now healing in the medical bay, warned Jake, "You carry fire, but fire can warm or burn." Jake didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because of questions. Why had the Varnak built an entire belief system around one human visit? What had Raylan Carter really done here? And most importantly, what if the prophecy wasn't about worship at all? The search begins. Jake stood in the deepest part of the ship, the core vault. This was where the oldest records were stored, untouched for generations. Lyra stood beside him, her face lit by the glow of old memory crystals floating in the air. "No one comes here," she whispered. "Only the high priests had access." Jake reached for a glowing red crystal marked with an old earth symbol. It hummed in his palm. He placed it into a nearby reader. The air shimmered. A hologram appeared, grainy, flickering. But it was a human. Raylan Carter. Jake stared, breath held. The man looked older than the photos, his face lined, his eyes tired. He wore a damaged Earth Fleet uniform. He began to speak. "If anyone finds this, then maybe the truth still matters. My mission was to observe the Varnak, but what I found was a people on the edge. Divided. Dying. Their leaders were locked in ancient rivalries, and their world was turning to ash. So I broke protocol. I gave them knowledge, clean energy tech, medical machines, stabilizers. I taught them how to work together." Jake's heart beat faster. "I didn't want to be worshipped. I told them again and again, I am just a man, not your savior." But they needed hope. So they created a story. They called me the Flame. And when I left, I feared what they might become without me. So I left this message, not to be honored, but to warn. The hologram flickered. If a human returned here, and they are treated like a god, stop them. Remind them of what happened. Don't repeat my mistake. Prophecy is not truth. It's a shadow of truth. The image faded. Jake stood still. He felt cold. Everything the Varnak believed had been built on a misunderstanding. They thought Raylan came to rule, but he came to help and begged not to be followed blindly. Lara looked shaken. "Our entire belief, our stories, it's all wrong." Jake shook his head. "Not wrong. Twisted." He looked back at the dark crystal vaults. They turned a teacher into a god. And now, they're doing it again with me. Lyra whispered, "What will you do now?" Jake clenched his fists. "Tell the truth, even if it burns everything down." Meanwhile, the shadows move. In a hidden corner of the ship, a small group of armored Varnak warriors gathered. Their faces were hard, their armor marked with ancient red glyphs, the Order of the Burning Path. Their leader, Commander Vex, slammed his hand on a metal table. "The human must fall," he growled. "He poisons our people with weakness." Another warrior hissed, "He dares rewrite the sacred flame." Vex leaned forward. "We strike before he speaks, before he destroys what makes us strong." A device blinked red in his hand. The speech of truth. Jake stood on the Grand Assembly deck, every Varnak crew member watching him, even those loyal to the old ways. Behind him, Lyra held the memory crystal. Beside him, Captain Elise Monroe stood in silence. She had come aboard with guards, allowed as a witness. Jake took the podium. "I was raised on Earth. I was told not to interfere with alien cultures. But I ended up here by accident. You welcomed me. You believed in me. You called me Flameborn." He paused. "But now I know the truth." He held up the crystal. "This is from Raylan Carter, my ancestor, your first flame." He placed the crystal into the projector. Raylan's voice filled the hall again. "If a human returns here, and they are treated like a god, stop them." Silence. Total silence. Some warriors lowered their heads. Others looked angry. One shouted, "Lies." Jake stepped forward. "No, truth. Your ancestors misunderstood. Raylan didn't want worship. He wanted peace. He gave you tools, not commandments." He raised his voice. "Today, I break the prophecy. I will not be your god. I will not be your leader. I will be your partner, if you choose to walk forward, not look backward." Lyra raised her staff high. "I choose truth." Others followed. One by one, the old flame began to flicker. Until, boom, an explosion rocked the hall. Smoke filled the air. Panic spread. Jake dropped to the ground, coughing. Red armored warriors stormed in, led by Vex. "Seize the false flame," he shouted. "The fight for the future." Captain Monroe drew her weapon. "Jake, behind me." But Lyra had already moved, staff in hand, blocking Vex's path. "You betray the people," she shouted. Vex laughed. "No, I protect them from lies." Lyra swung her staff hard, knocking his blade aside. Jake helped a wounded alien to safety. More warriors joined the fight, but so did those loyal to Jake. Sparks flew. Alarms blared. Jake picked up a fallen staff, not to fight, but to stop the chaos. He slammed the end on the floor. "Enough." His voice echoed. Everyone froze. Vex turned to him. "You have no power here." Jake pointed to the projection still running. Raylan Carter's final words glowing above them. "You think strength comes from fear, but real strength comes from knowing when to stop." He looked around. "I don't want to be remembered. I want to be understood." The ship fell silent. Then, Zurek stepped into the room, arm in a sling, but eyes sharp. "I stand with the boy," he said. Vex looked around. He saw he was outnumbered. He dropped his blade and bowed. Aftermath. The rebellion was over. Vex and his loyalists were disarmed and placed under watch. The old flame code was officially removed from the ship's protocols. The Varkalon would be led by a council, made up of Varnek and human representatives. Jake refused to take a seat, but agreed to guide when asked. Captain Monroe returned to her ship, smiling faintly. "You did what your ancestor couldn't," she told Jake. "You finished the story." Jake stood on the observation deck. Lyra joined him. "No more gods," she said. "No more gods," Jake agreed. They stared at the stars. And for the first time, the Varkalon felt like a home. The betrayal and the uprising. The halls of the Varkalon were quieter now. No chants of Flameborn, no eyes filled with blind devotion. Instead, there were questions, doubts, whispers. And Jake Carter could feel the weight of all of them pressing down on his shoulders. The truth had been spoken. The prophecy had been broken. And the old ways were gone. But freedom didn't come with peace. It came with chaos. The fractures appear. Jake walked through the ship's mess hall, where Varnak soldiers and engineers now sat in uneasy silence. Some nodded at him with quiet respect. Others turned away. He sat beside Lyra and whispered, "It's different now." She nodded. "We broke the chain, but people are still scared. For generations, they believed in the flame. Now, they don't know who they are without it." Jake looked around. "They don't have to believe in me. I just want them to believe in themselves." Lyra looked down at her tray. "That's harder than you think." A young engineer nearby suddenly slammed his tools onto the table and stood up. "We were strong before," he shouted. "We had purpose. Now what? Chaos, doubt, fear." Others around him murmured in agreement. Jake stood up slowly. "What's your name?" The engineer scowled. "Narek." "Narek," Jake said gently. "Your strength never came from me. It was always yours. You just didn't see it before." Narek glared. "Words won't fix this, human. Only action." He stormed out. Jake sat back down, exhausted. "They don't hate you," Lyra said. "They're just afraid. The world they knew is gone." Jake whispered, "Then we help them build a better one." In the shadows. Again, deep in the lower decks, in a section of the ship long sealed off, something stirred. A symbol was drawn in red ink on a bulkhead wall, the flame glyph. A group of masked Varnak stood in a circle, their hands placed over the symbol. "The human has betrayed the flame," one whispered. "We must restore the old fire," said another. Their leader stepped forward. Not Vex. Someone new, younger, sharper. It was Narek. His voice was calm but fierce. "They gave us purpose. The flame made us more than animals in space. Now he tells us to forget. No, we will remind them. With blood if we must. They raised their fists. The flame must rise again. Signs of trouble. The next few days were uneasy. Captain Monroe had returned to her own ship, staying close in orbit, but giving Jake space. The council had started forming. Slowly, painfully, but at least it was progress. Jake spent hours helping Varnak soldiers transition from religious code to regular command. It was hard. Every order he gave was followed, then questioned. Not because they didn't respect him, but because they were trying to think for themselves. It was what Jake wanted. But change was messy. And then the first sabotage happened. A power line in the medical bay exploded, nearly killing 2 wounded council members. Lyra found the tampered wires herself. This wasn't an accident, she told Jake. Then came the second. The Varkalon's food systems were hacked, delivering poisoned rations to a training squad. 3 Varnak nearly died. Jake stood over their beds, fists clenched. "We've got traitors," he said. "People who want the prophecy back." Lyra looked worried. "It's not just belief. It's identity. Without it, some of them feel lost. Weak. And now someone's giving them a new voice." Jake asked the ship's eye to scan for known symbols from old cults. Only one matched. The Ember Circle, a secret group that once worshipped Raylan Carter like a living god, and punished anyone who doubted the flame. They were thought to be gone. They weren't. A choice of fire. The next council meeting was tense. Jake stood at the head, facing members of the newly formed Varnak leadership team. Engineers, soldiers, teachers, and even a few scientists. Lyra sat beside him. "We have a problem," Jake said. "Someone is trying to take us backward. They're using fear to bring back worship. The cult known as the Ember Circle is back." Murmurs filled the room. "They blame me for the truth," Jake continued. "They want the flame back, even if it means war." Zurich, arm now out of his sling, stood. "Then we must root them out. Arrest anyone who still believes in the old code." Jake shook his head. "No, that would make us tyrants. We don't punish belief. We fight violence." "But belief fuels violence," another shouted. "They'll kill again." Jake raised his voice. "Then we don't fight them with fear. We fight them with something they've forgotten." He looked around the room. "Hope. The uprising begins." That night, it began. Jake was walking through the central deck when the alarms blared. Alert. Unauthorized access in weapons control. Jake ran. By the time he got there, flames had erupted. The Ember Circle had hijacked a weapons station and turned the ship's internal cannons against the outer hull. If they pierced the wrong section, the ship could be torn apart. Lyra arrived, staff in hand. "We can't let them fire." Jake turned to the security team. "No lethal force. We stop them, but we don't become them." They charged the room. Smoke, shouting, sparks, a blast of heat. Inside, Narek stood at the control panel, hands glowing red from override heat. "You turned us into sheep," he screamed at Jake. "You took our fire." Jake stepped forward. "No, I showed you where your fire really comes from." Narek shook his head. "You betrayed us." Jake didn't draw a weapon. He walked closer. "You're afraid, just like I was, just like Raylan was. But fear doesn't make us strong. Faith in each other does." Narek raised a weapon. Lyra stepped in front of Jake. "No." But Narek hesitated. His hand shook. Then, he dropped the gun. The security team moved in, cuffing him. Tears ran down his face. "I just wanted to feel powerful again." Jake looked at him and whispered, "Then start by choosing to stop hurting others. That's real strength. The flame reborn." The next morning, Jake stood on the bridge. He looked out at the stars, then turned to the crew. "We survived worship. We survived lies. And now, we survived truth." He held up the red crystal again. But truth is not the end. It's the beginning. He placed it into a new pedestal. Raylan Carter's final message echoed once more. If a human returns here, remind them. Jake looked at the crew. I was reminded, and now I remind you. We walk forward, not as gods, but as people. The crew stood, not in worship, but in unity. Even Zurich bowed his head, not in surrender, in respect. And Jake finally understood. The flame hadn't been about fire. It had been about light. And light could be shared. The day the worship ended, the Varkalon drifted in high orbit above a quiet planet, once a battlefield, now a neutral ground. Its hull still bore scorch marks from the uprising, but inside, something had changed. Gone were the sacred chants, the polished shrines, the glowing symbols of the Flameborn. Instead, banners of unity now hung from the walls, not in worship, but in remembrance. The flame was no longer a figure. It was a lesson, and Jake Carter had become its final student. The tribunal arrives. A flash in the stars. 3 massive ships emerged from hyperspace, sleek, silver, and marked with the emblem of the Galactic Tribunal. They were the final authority in the known galaxy, and they had come for judgment. Jake stood on the bridge of the Varkalon as the ships approached. Lyra stood beside him, dressed in her new role. Council voice of the people, no longer a follower, now a leader. Zurich stood on the other side, his posture more relaxed than Jake had ever seen. Even he had changed, less commander, more teacher. Captain Elise Monroe hailed the ship. Jake, she said through the screen, this is it. Are you ready? Jake gave a tired smile. I've been ready since the day I tried to say, I'm not in charge, and the doors started obeying me. She didn't laugh, but her eyes softened. They'll want explanations. They'll want blame. Jake nodded. Then I'll give them truth. The hearing. The tribunal's court was a floating dome, constructed in orbit, surrounded by silence. It allowed every race, every voice, every law to be weighed without interference. 3 figures sat at the center. One was human, one was Kalari, one was a Varnak elder, selected specifically to avoid bias. Jake stood alone in the center of the glass floor. Below him, the Varkalon floated like a shadow. Beside him, a glowing record played out holograms of everything. The prophecy, the worship, the battles, the betrayal, and the breaking of the old code. The Varnak elder finally spoke. You are the descendant of Raylan Carter, the first flame. Jake nodded. Yes. You stood at the center of a belief system that nearly caused another war. I did. You accepted their control of a weapon ship, commanded their forces, and changed their structure. I did that too. And now, what do you believe you are? Jake looked up. I am proof that humanity doesn't need to be worshipped. It just needs to be understood. The Kalari judge narrowed her eyes. And the power you held, the weapons, the title. Jake smiled gently. I gave them up. I asked the Varnak to form their own council. I refused a seat. I didn't want to lead them. I wanted them to lead themselves. The human judge finally spoke. Then why did they listen to you? Jake looked at the floor. Because, for the first time in their history, someone didn't use their belief against them. I used it to tell them the truth, even when it hurt. Silence. Then, the Varnak elder stood. Your ancestor lit the flame. You extinguished it. He stepped forward. And now, in its ashes, something better may rise. The chamber lights dimmed, and the tribunal passed their verdict. No punishment, no exile, no glory. Instead, they declared something new. Let this day be known not as a trial, but as a turning point. A new beginning. Back on the Varkalon, a new plaque was installed in the central hall. It read, "The flame was never meant to burn forever. It was meant to light the way." Jake stood before it, Lyra and Zurich at his side. The ship was now part of the Galactic Peace Corps, no longer a weapon of war, but a vessel of diplomacy and protection. The Varnak crew remained aboard, by choice, not by faith. They wore no flame symbols, only the badge of unity, a simple open hand, crossed with a star. Farewell and flight. Jake stood on the landing deck as Captain Monroe's shuttle prepared to leave. She looked at him. You could come back to Earth now. We'd give you a hero's welcome. Jake chuckled. I think I've had enough hero status to last 10 lifetimes. Monroe nodded. Still, you'll always be the cadet who rewrote a prophecy. Jake looked out at the stars. I just told the truth. And that, she said, stepping into the shuttle, was the bravest thing of all. One final choice. Later that night, Jake walked alone through the Varkalon's garden deck, newly grown with real plants from the Varnak homeworld and Earth. He sat by the fountain. Lyra found him there. You're leaving, she said softly. Jake nodded. Not forever. Just enough to give you space to grow without me standing in the way. You're not in the way. Jake smiled. If I stay, people will always look at me like a leader, even if they don't want to. I need to show them I meant it. I really don't want to be a god, or a flame, or a symbol. Lyra looked down. We'll miss you. Jake stood and gently handed her something. A small round pin. The old flame symbol. But it was broken, split down the middle, with a star rising between the halves. A reminder, Jake said, that we can break something without destroying it. And that fire can be reborn as light. She took it with trembling fingers. I won't forget. Jake stepped back. Don't worship me, Lyra. She looked him in the eyes. I won't. She smiled. I'll remember you. Years later, a young Varnak child walked through a museum on the peaceful colony of Neuraxis Prime. He stopped in front of a display. It held an old staff, a burned council robe, a red crystal memory shard, and a picture. Jake Carter, smiling, standing beside humans and Varnak alike. Below the picture was a quote. They gave me control of a battleship. They worshipped me. I gave it back and taught them how to stand. Cadet Jake Carter, Flamebreaker. The child turned to his teacher. Was he really a god? The teacher smiled. No, he was better than a god. She looked up at the stars. He was human.